Hello, Alabama fans. I'm Tim Watts, BamaOnline.com publisher, and with me is Andrew Bone, the man in the black hat, recruiting editor, sleeps very little with two young children, stays after it, big basketball expert. No, he's not. But we are here talking recruiting. Three official visitor weekends down, Andrew. One more. Been a lot of activity in those 3 weeks. I mean, when you have a weekend that felt like nine official visitors, they're doing some heavy lifting when you're like, oh, it's only nine this week.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it felt like we had a little bit of a break. First couple weekends, I think it was 13, 11, and it felt like 20 and 15, but and then this past weekend, 9 felt like 4. So it seemed like a little bit of a break, but we also talked about it last week heading into the weekend. Uh, yeah, I think the first 2 weeks we felt really good about certain players that were coming into town that had been to Tuscaloosa several times. Felt very comfortable that Alabama was going to be in that top two, top three heading into final visits and decisions. But with this group that came in this past weekend, you're like, who knows?
Yeah.
We had no really good feel on any of these guys. I mean, obviously they had some big names that were in town, like Brandon Arrington and Nick Abrams and Elijah Golden. But obviously we saw the Brandon Arrington news last night, him narrowing it down to 2. But it was still a good weekend, and kind of sets up for the main event this upcoming weekend where they're going to have 15 official visits. So it's going to be kind of a wild finish, and see how things shake out over the course of this next, really the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Speaking of Arrington, he was the only 5-star on campus this week. And that's the only weekend out of the four there was just a single 5-star. This next weekend's got who's the second?
Jordan Edmonds was also in town
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
on an
He's
unofficial.
committed. That's fair. Yeah, we should talk about the commitments more, but Jordan was on campus. But the uncommitted prospects, that's when we have three coming next week, all from the state, which is pretty exciting. Let's talk about the Arrington news. We've known the whole time the Bama staff had a good relation. Courtney Morgan brought one. Interesting prospect for me because I think he's a wide receiver. He wants to play cornerback. Elite skill set, narrowed his list for two. Alabama didn't make the cut. Give me some thoughts on that.
Not really surprised that Alabama is no longer in it. I was surprised that he came out shortly after the visit and said, "All right, here's my top two," and it was Texas A&M and Oregon. Thought maybe it would be potentially moving up his commitment date or shutting down a visit to Texas A&M this weekend. Wasn't really sure what was going to happen there when he announced that a decision was going to or some sort of news was happening last night. But coming off the Alabama trip, we had heard talking to different people that even though the visit went really well and he posted a lot of positive things about the trip, that it was still going to be a very very big shock that if he was going to end up in Tuscaloosa. I think he maybe trolled some fans and and maybe even some reporters that were out there that saw what he was posting and thinking, oh man, Alabama's going to have a great shot now to land him. But from what we were hearing leading up to the visit and then shortly after the visit, Alabama did not see him joining this class at all. And then when we saw that announcement of the top two last night, didn't really catch us off guard, but certainly was still a surprise that he announced the top two, at that time.
It makes sense. I mean, we knew if it came down to an NIL decision that it wasn't going to be Alabama. Alabama has Jordan Edmondson, first of all, their cornerback one committed, has him locked in. A guy they really like. So they weren't going to be able to they weren't going to spend a lot of money. They also got a young secondary where cornerback's not a top priority. So we knew if it was an NIL decision, when it's Oregon and Aggies, you got to think that was kind of the way they went. But I do think he had a good time on his visit. It's hard not to. I mean, we see this every week. These guys are going crazy on the official visits, really well set up, camaraderie. He knows a lot of the West Coast guys in the secondary. But Brandon Arrington's down to Oregon, Texas A&M, so we'll be moving on from him. Andrew Bone, we look at some of the guys that came in, and it was kind of like we're getting to know him. Roman Voss, Nick Abrams, who doesn't talk much. You had good interviews there. Javian Mallory committed to Miami was an interesting one because they also have Derek Cooper, who's a running back committed. And again, I mean, part of this, you look at this list and then you think about who's coming this weekend with the Xavier Crow. It's hard to kind of figure out which one, though, how these dominoes will fall.
Yeah, I think with running backs, all the attention, it seems like for the last year has been on Xavier Crowell, who's going to be making his trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Highly anticipated. One of the best running backs in the country, number 2 back overall. So I think everyone just assumes he's going to end up at Alabama. I don't want to say that just yet. Let's see how the official visit goes this weekend, but he is making a commitment next week. Things look good for Alabama heading into the weekend, but we shall see. He's coming off some great officials. Does Alabama? Let's say Alabama does get Kroll. Are they able to get a second back in this? They've had Derek Cooper in town 2 weekends ago. Now Cooper, I know you probably accidentally said it, but Cooper is not committed to Miami yet. He is a top target for Miami. I think they feel really good there.
They're all in on him. Yes.
We're definitely all in there. But Javian Mallory has been committed to Miami since the spring. So that's a situation that we're watching still closely. If Derek Cooper ends up at Miami, does that potentially make Javian Mallory look a little bit more at Alabama? Now he's still committed to Miami, going to Miami this weekend. So we'll kind of see how that all shakes out. They're going to bring in a couple guys this weekend: Jabari Barnett, Ryan Estrada. Barnett was offered earlier this year, Estrada this spring. Kind of see how things shake out that way. But with Javian Mallory, he said some positive things after the trip, and he's a guy that's been recruited by Alabama since last year, made his first trip to Tuscaloosa for the official visit. But Robert Gillespie, Courtney Morgan went and saw him during the spring. Gillespie also had an in-home visit with him back in January. So that's a relationship that's gone on for a while. Would be kind of shocked if he ended up flipping from Miami to Alabama, being down there in Boca Raton. But crazier things have happened.
The thing about Kroll, we've never really talked about his December 31st original commitment date. You remember that one? You remember when he announced his first one? We were like,
he said,
yeah, we were like, we're not seeing that happening, but definitely moved it up right after his Bama visit. It's been big time prospect, 5-star in-state, big name since his 8th grade year. I mean, we've been talking about him a long time. It tells you you're getting old when you're talking about 8th graders, and now you're covering their commitment in a few weeks.
He did reclassify, so
he did move up.
So we'll take a.
I can't get over the reclassification. I'm telling you, when I was in school, you reclassified. We called it flunking. You were held back. We never went up. We were just lucky to go forward when we were supposed to. Right. Andrew, let's talk about Nick Abrams, because the linebacker position is very interesting. They weren't looking for a lot of guys. They're going to lose 3 seniors. They brought in 3 last year. They've got Caden Jones, who they like, who they think they can play. Also, you factor in that Wolf position, we slide them into a second category. Let's talk about Abrams, who's kind of a professional when dealing with him, because he really doesn't. He says a lot, but it doesn't really tip his hand in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no way. I think that a lot of the schools are these schools, the 4 schools that are on the list, have done a really great job recruiting him. He's had great visits to each one of them. Officially and unofficially, he's going to take his last official this weekend to Oregon. I think out of all the schools, that might be the one that's probably on the outside, heading into the trip this weekend, just because it's so far away. Maryland kid, he's it's just so far across the country. It just seems like it might be tough for them. But Michigan done a great job. Georgia's done a great job recruiting him. But they really like Alabama a lot. I had a chance to talk to his father last night, and he had glowing things to say about Chuck Morrell, the inside linebackers coach. They had a great opportunity to spend time with Kane Womack and Coach DeBoer, and they really laid out a plan, not just a plan for football wise, but academic wise, looking to go into engineering, and they laid out the the coursework and what he would do freshman year, sophomore year, and all that kind of stuff. And that really impressed them a good bit. But also, spending time with the coaching staff. What would it be like once he got onto campus? The moment he got onto campus to spring practice to the fall, all the way until his sophomore year. So those were some things that really caught their eye. And we'll have a full in-depth interview with his father later on this week on BOL. We've already got an interview with Abrams on the site, so go check that out. But I think they did a really good job with Nick this weekend. But as you said, this is a guy that's tough to read. Not really sure what he's going to end up doing. I would say for the last few months, I felt like he ends up in the SEC with Alabama and Georgia, potentially battling it out there. So we'll see what happens. He's committing on July the 16th, but I felt like they did a good job there. And as you said, linebacker is interesting. I mean, I don't know how things are going to really shake out there just yet. It seems like everybody that they're involved with, they've got a chance. I think Sincere Johnson's announcing on Thursday, but I think we're kind of on the same page that he's probably going to end up staying in Ohio and going to Ohio State. But the rest of these targets, I think it's kind of a toss up.
Yeah, we don't talk enough about it probably. We talk about the offensive line, we talk about Coach Cap and Courtney Morgan. Well, the inside linebackers have Chuck Morrell and Kane Womack, who recruited that position last year before he became a walk-in DC, meaning he just roams everywhere. So they're going to get some attention. It's also a position that's plentiful. We look at the board. I mean, you can find linebackers in the South hand over fist because, there's so many athletes that fit that mold.
And people keep saying, well, we're going to lose this guy and that guy. Well, you're not trying to – I mean, yes, you want to get some high school players, but when you're going to lose 3 inside linebackers, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the portal and get.
And you know what? It's going to be extremely attractive portal situation for linebackers who've been sitting on the bench 2 years, not a lot of playing time, looking to play. Alabama's going to be attractive. We saw that with the kid who came from Colorado last year. Let's talk about a guy I'm pretty interested in. It's I think just his name, Roman Voss, tight end from Minnesota. There's a lot of potential storylines there. Good athlete, down to Alabama and Minnesota. And, times have changed. You're recruiting a quarterback against Iowa State. You're recruiting a tight end against Minnesota. And with the new, the House committee ruling, you're expecting some of these in-state schools, even though Tamala is out of state. You're expecting these guys to go a little bit heavier to get some of the bigger names they target. But Voss had a really good visit to Alabama.
Whenever I see a tight end and I see that they are a priority target for Iowa, I automatically think, this guy is legit. And Voss was a top priority for Iowa. Iowa didn't make the final 2, but they really wanted him. So I was like, this guy's probably pretty good. He plays quarterback for his high school team. It started at quarterback for his high school team since the 8th grade. But he's being recruited as a tight end. He's 6'4", came in at 230 pounds during the official visit. Alabama likes him. I think the biggest question is, can they pull him out of Minnesota? Because as you mentioned, Minnesota, not saying he's not a top target for Alabama, but Minnesota probably sees him as the number 1 target in their recruiting class. He would be the highest ranked player in their recruiting class, the number 1 player in the state of Minnesota. That would be a huge win for their program. But Alabama has an offer on the table. They've hosted him twice now. I had a great conversation with his father, Rod, yesterday. And as you mentioned, there are some connections there. His father did business in the agriculture industry with Ryan Grubb 20 years ago. This is before Ryan Grubb became a college assistant coach. He was an assistant coach, an offensive coordinator at a high school in Iowa, but he was working in the agriculture business as well. And the two reconnected. Roman and his older brother trained with Kalen DeBoer's best friend from college at Sioux Falls, who was Kalen DeBoer's quarterback. So there are some connections there.
That's crazy.
They really like Alabama a lot. And, his dad said, it's going to be a tough decision for him. Alabama's the mecca of college football. But you could, but on the other end, you've got Minnesota, where if you go there, and you do well, you're probably going to be a hero in the state for the rest of your life. And it feels like Roman is a guy that has the talent, the athleticism to be an NFL, a future NFL guy, no matter where he goes. Whether it was Alabama or Minnesota. But there was a lot of schools that came after him late. He came out early May, announced the top two of Alabama and Minnesota. After he did that, the floodgates sort of opened. Ohio State, Tennessee, Oregon. A lot of schools started reaching out, connecting with him, see if he would, consider taking a visit there during the summer. And he said, you know what, these are the two schools that I like the most. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I'll take these visits, make my decision. So we'll see something over the course of the next week or two with Roman. But from talking to his dad, they really had a great time in Tuscaloosa and seemed to be very high on Alabama.
And look, the Midwest produces a very successful tight end recruiting base, and Alabama has another one coming in this week with Max Sutter from Illinois. So again, you're talking about how the world's changed. They're recruiting Illinois head to head with Illinois among other schools to try to keep Max Sutter. He's a kid I like. Him and Roman are both really good athletes. Play different positions, long rangey, upside guys. Although I think Sutter's probably the more likely to come straight away and have an impact. The visitors list was, like we said, a little bit different. Let's touch on the Wilson Zaire and Marky Walbridge too. We haven't really talked about these guys. Offensive linemen, 4 stars, different parts of the country. One's from Georgia local, one's from Massachusetts. To me, it just shows how deep and far that Courtney Morgan and Coach Cap are going to go for this offensive line, because they're constantly finding new guys to be involved with.
Yeah, they went all over the country this cycle, including Hawaii, to look for offensive linemen. And we knew this was going to be a smaller offensive line class, 3, maybe 4, depending on who they could get. But they were able. I think last week, either on the show and I know I wrote about it on BOL. Going into the weekend, the two guys who seemed like the biggest long shots were Walbridge and Wilson Zaire, just because they had not really talked heavily about Alabama. They were coming in for official visits. Zaire's an interesting one because he's 6'6", 290 pounds, plays same high school in Georgia as Marshall Pritchett, Alabama freshman tight end, did a year ago. So they were teammates. Originally from Germany, moved to the States last year. His older brother actually played at Auburn, no longer there, but played at Auburn. So I think Auburn's done a really good job of connecting with him and kind of selling their program. Been there a bunch of times. So Alabama really had some ground to gain. I think he had a great trip to Alabama this past weekend. The one big hurdle with Zaire is he wants to get an aviation degree. He wants to be a pilot. Alabama does not offer an aviation degree, at least at this time. Auburn does. Georgia has an aviation program. So that's something that he's looking at. But, Alabama talked to him about kind of some options that he might be able to have in Tuscaloosa. So I think they've at least made him think about it. He's going to go home to Germany. I think he's already there. I'm going to spend some time there. He's going on a little bit of a vacation. Going to spend some time, think about it, then make a decision. I would say Alabama's probably not going to get him, but could be wrong. I think with Walbridge, that's an interesting recruit. He's kind of lean. He's 6'6", 275 pounds.
Very lean.
But he's very athletic. Plays different sports and kind of will remind you a little bit of Jackson Lloyd from a year ago because of how athletic he is. And Jackson was a little bit bigger. Jackson was more in that 290 range, whereas Walbridge needs to gain a little bit of weight, but seemed like he had a great time on the official visit. I think that if I were to pick, I think he probably stays somewhere up in the Northeast, Wisconsin. Who else is in it? Boston College,
Penn State.
Yeah. So those are some schools that are high.
Maybe Michigan.
Michigan. I think actually Michigan's probably the school that seems like
they have that northern vibe. He has that.
I think
he does have
probably the team to beat in that recruitment. So would be surprised, but we've got a great interview with his mom coming to BOL later today. So maybe maybe our minds will change on that.
Do us a favor. We ask you every show, give us a like, give us that thumbs up, hit them with that thumb, Andrew. Give us the likes and the thumbs up. We appreciate it. Y'all been doing us a scary thumb, people. You ought to give it a thumbs up just because I have to look at the thumb. But we appreciate everything. No, you're bending that other one intentionally to make it look like that awkward one. We appreciate y'all turning in. We know your time is valuable, as is ours. We appreciate y'all jumping in here. We appreciate the comments and being active. And again, you can find us at bamaonline.com. It's $1 for the first week. We're definitely worth 100 pennies if you want to check us out. The roundtable, the Bama Online message board, is constantly thumping with information, not just recruiting information, team information, discussion. Some of the best conversations I've ever seen in my life, or silliest, have happened on the roundtable. Me and Andrew are there constantly. Charlie Potter, who's currently emotionally scarring everybody in Japan, is on vacation, but he'll be back next week. And Blake Byler, our young guy who comes in, does a good job with the hoops guys, and deals in with recruiting and the football team as well. So please join us if you feel like it. And thanks for being here. Andrew, a lot of the biggest news, we did our nuggets. And for you not familiar, the Bama Online nuggets are the insider scoop piece that we do based on the visits or whatever we're hearing. This time of year, it's the visits. But also, a lot of the discussion was for visitors going other than Alabama, right? You had Xavier Griffin going to Texas. You had Malachi Lee going on his own dime to Georgia. Top targets for Bama taking visits elsewhere. Xavier was the one we were maybe watching the closest, him and Malachi, obviously the top two, wondering how they would feel the vibe afterwards. But I think it was more subdued than maybe the Texas fan base wanted.
Yeah, he didn't give out a lot. After the trip, do I think that Texas is still in it? Absolutely. I think they're certainly pushing hard to get them. I think they are. A lot of people are talking about the whole rev share deal. How that's going to kind of equal the playing field for everybody. I think one thing everybody has to still understand is, schools are still going to push NIL. I mean, these NIL deals still have to get approved, but they're still going to say, hey, we can get you this, we can get you that on this NIL package. But with the rev share, you can make the decision on how you're going to spend it. The rev share doesn't say, all right, you got to give max number of dollars to every single player on the team. Or that's not how it works. They're going to be able to spend that however they want. And they're going to make promises to every single player that's out there, whether they're on your team, whether they're on your recruit. They're going to make a promise and say, we will guarantee you this amount. Some schools are going to go high. Some schools are going to say, hey, this is the most we can do. But that's how it's going to work out. Now, I'm not saying that just for Xavier Griffin. I'm saying that for everybody. So, we know that Xavier Griffin is one of the best players in the country. He's going to get some good offers. Alabama certainly would like for him to be a part of their team. We've talked about throughout the entire year how he's a wolf target for Alabama, but they've also talked to him about being an inside linebacker. Think more about Jahad Campbell, how they were able to move him around. I think they kind of see Xavier sort of doing the same thing. He's not a 230-pound guy right now. He's 200. I don't know if he's 210 at this time, but about the same size as Jahad Campbell was coming out of high school. So that's a guy that can move around. A lot of versatility. So Alabama likes that about him, but and we're going to see that throughout the country over these next few weeks. Schools are going to, be trying to make these promises. They're going to try to be getting deals signed before July the 1st. There's just a lot that's going to be going on over these next few weeks on the I keep saying NIL front, but let's just call it the money front. There's just a lot that people still don't understand about it, but there's still a lot of promises that are being made from schools all across the country for every single top recruit that's still available.
And I think they'll throw big bags at them.
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
I was just saying they're still making offers to all the guys that are available, but also that are not available, guys that are committed elsewhere right now. Those guys are still taking visits, still listening. One good thing we heard today was, Jordan Edmonds, and this was really positive because, in this day and age, you see so many commitments that are taking visits late. They're taking official visits. On these final weekends, we saw Zion Gibson, Chris Booker, Jamarian Matthews, 3 Alabama commitments, all visit places last week. Jordan Edmonds has been really pushed hard by Georgia and Tennessee these last few months, especially Georgia. They were really trying to get him in this weekend on June the 20th, the final weekend before the dead period. And I don't think he was strongly considering it, but he does like the coaching staff. Had told them a few months ago that he would come in for the visit, and he was still considering it. But on Tuesday morning, called the Georgia coaching staff and told them that he wasn't going to make the trip to Athens this weekend. So I thought that was a really good positive win for Alabama with a 5-star corner and obviously one of the best players in the country and from the state of Georgia.
I think what we're going to see with the NIL, going back to that, is that people are still going to make big, make them offers this year, worry next year whether you can pay them or not. I mean, that's kind of there's no way. We've seen the numbers. Some of the guys, Miami's got committed, and USC especially. There's no way if that committee's in place and they have to approve all that, they can do it. So there's a lot of front loading, paying in advance. And I think you're going to have to rely on some loyalty. I mean, I know there's contracts being signed and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, we're in June, so the desperation hasn't really set in for the schools, but the schools are going to some schools will get to the point where they've got to have a linebacker and they're going to go all in. Malachi Lee to me was the most interesting. I mean, he took a very early visit to Georgia. It's like in April, right?
Mm-hmm.
He took an official visit in April, wanted to go back and kind of see more of the thing, took a bunch of relatives, went back for an unofficial visit. In the past, that's been a done deal when we've seen that for the 9 times out of 10, right? You take an official, you come back for an unofficial. That's kind of the done deal. The vibe from Georgia wasn't that it was over. There's still recruiting to be done. The one thing I find interesting is everybody still thinks they have a chance to some degree. Alabama, Texas, Georgia, and Michigan's coming up. I'm thinking we're going to hear positive things. Part of that could be just a good family. They're not going to have a whole lot of negative stuff to say, but I still think Bama's heavily involved there.
Yeah, they are, and they've been in constant contact with him and his family. Pretty much on every visit. So, they had a great trip to Tuscaloosa a few weeks ago. Still very high on Lee's list, on his family's list. As we've seen through the years, I would not be surprised if we saw Lee's family move with him wherever he decides to go. So, and they might be looking to say, hey, what's the best environment for us as well. So, I think that Alabama's done a really good job with him, recruiting him. They only have 2 offensive line commitments right now, both more so interior guys. They would love to add a tackle in this class, and Lee's certainly been one of their top priority guys for a long time. So we'll see how that shakes out. He's got an announcement set for June the 27th. A big visit, as you said, to Michigan this weekend, because they have been, I would say, heading into the summer, they have been presumed as the leader in his recruitment, have recruited him the longest. I think this is going to be a big family trip. Would they be comfortable in Ann Arbor? And do they feel like Michigan is the best fit for him? So I still think it comes down to Alabama and Michigan. I know Georgia feels like they've got a great chance as well, but I think because of how the family feels about Alabama, I think that they've got a really strong shot. So biggest thing is, how does this Michigan visit go this weekend?
I don't think it hurts having the Tagovailoas involved. I mean, you got Nalu, you got Diane. They have emotional. There's connections to each other. I think some people are still, when you hear they're moving with their parents, they always think it's college related. A lot of this has been going on since we got in the business. Parents often want to be near their children. They often want to be, because you can take your family base and move it wherever you want to be with a kid who goes out of state. I mean, that they're still here. 2 of his parents are still in Alabaster. I mean, they could live anywhere in the world and they're still here. They're comfortable here. They're ingrained in the community. I'm very involved.
And there's one small aspect for this weekend. It could potentially, I don't know if it's going to have an impact, but it's something to monitor. Is as of right now, Alabama is going to have a quarterback on campus from originally from Hawaii, from Honolulu, Tavian Kawa, who's going to be making an official visit to Alabama. Earned an offer last week. He goes to school in Utah, Orem High School in Utah, but originally from Honolulu. Does that potentially have any sort of, I don't know if it's going to have a major impact on his decision, but at
It
least
won't hurt.
it doesn't
And
hurt.
he works out with Dalu
Yeah.
to his dad, who is a very well-known quarterback. And guess who else works out with Nalu? Trent Seaborn, who just got an Alabama
Yeah.
offer. So this is a guy, he has a great program, runs it, works it. Quarterbacks are obviously his specialty. So that those connections and Hawaiian connections often run very, very deep from that family mode. So something that definitely helps Alabama there. Before we get out of here, we're going to briefly give you now. Look, later on in this week, Thursday, maybe Friday, because this official visitor list is in motion. We just broke the news. Tristan Keys is not coming in. 5-star wide receivers not coming in this week. Emmanuel Ruffin, the Bessemer City defensive lineman, is not coming in. We're adding people to the visitors list. We're subtracting. It's only Tuesday. By Thursday, we should know a little bit more. So we're going to have a show on Thursday or Friday previewing that show. And also, it's the last visit. They're dead until September, so there's going to be a lot of jockeying to get all these prospects on campus. But Alabama, big one. Let's touch on the in-state guys next week. We're going to go in depth, but you get 3 in-state guys, all 5 stars coming in next week. And I think we've been talking about Tank Jones, Kroll, and Sedarian Morgan for a very long time.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of in-state focus. Even though there's going to be a lot of out-of-state guys on campus. I mean, 15 official visits this weekend. But there's going to be a lot of focus, a lot of attention on the in-state guys. Obviously from an Alabama perspective, but really from a fan perspective. After last year signing 2 in-state guys, does it really matter if you've signed 7, 8, 9, 10 in-state guys? I mean, if you can get the guys that you really want, yeah, it does matter. But there's going to be obviously some serious discussions here this weekend with these guys because they have gone on trips all over the country. Schools that are really pushing hard to try to get them, whether it's Oregon, Florida, Texas A&M. All these schools are coming after these guys.
Texas
that are really trying to pull them out of the state of Alabama. How do you pull a 5-star out of the state of Alabama? If you're an out-of-state school, well, you better offer them more money, and that's what's probably going down. So I think with Alabama, you put your best foot forward, you make your best deal possible with these guys, see where things land. But going to be a great weekend. We'll go over it a little bit later on this week, but it's great in-state guys, great out-of-state guys. Final weekend of summer visits before the dead period. Then we're going to see a lot of commitment. So
a lot of chasing news, and July will be a lot of chasing news, just like it was last year. And I kind of respect the way Alabama's going about this. I think they're ahead of a lot of schools. Other schools are doing it where they're already working in the parameters of the money they've got, because they've got, that money's for an entire roster, and you're very seldom going to find a high school player who's going to be better next year than they're going to have guys on that team for the most part. Andrew Bone, we will have that preview later in the week. If you give us a chance, give us a like and a thumbs up. Check us out on BamaOnline.com. I'm about to go post a picture of Andrew's thumb right now. We're going to have everybody compare to see who's got the most awkward thumb. But we appreciate y'all for being here. Again, Andrew Bone, tell them we'll see them later in the week.
Yeah, if you want to talk to us right now, we'll be on BamaOnline.com on the BOL Roundtable, so come talk to us. We got a lot of content coming out throughout the week. We'll have in-depth breakdowns of all the visitors. We got more features, interviews coming out from the guys that have that visited this past weekend, and we'll look ahead to kind of where Alabama sits with their remaining targets heading into these final visits and upcoming decisions.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you later in the week. Roll Tide.